Livestock owners are practicing ranching, and that is helping their respective economies because livestock play a pivotal role in human development and remain the main source of protein. And now we have in the studio Saleh Momale, Executive Director, Pastoral Reserve and Lecturer, Geography Department at Bayero University, Kano. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Good morning, Nigeria.
Good to have you, Jonas.
Thank you very much.
Of recent, the conversation about open grazing, to ranch or not to ranch, has taken over the airspace. And we've seen some states come up with laws, to criminalize open grazing. And even across board, there is a consensus, apparently, by lawmakers, governors, about the sustainability of open grazing. But again, how to deal with it, there are quite divergent views as to the approach on how to handle it. Where do you stand in this arguments?
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning, Nigerians. First, I need to appreciate the Trust Television and also to welcome you for coming strongly on board and for also engaging the Nigerian public and creating many of the discourses that is helping the country to shape its policies. I think I will start my discourse by first of all reminding us as Nigerians of the importance of the sector we are talking about. The pastoral population and the pastoral economy, by the analysis conducted recently, is ₦1 trillion worth of asset and investment in this country. The recent analysis indicates that if we are to turn it into monetary terms, it's worth over 33 trillion naira. Now, this is a huge industry that no nation can afford to play with. Again, although there are no reliable or accurate statistics on the population of the pastoral population in Nigeria, the general estimates put them between 12 to 15, in some estimates up to 18 million people. This is a huge national population whose development, whose economy should be of strong interest to the government, to the people of Nigeria. So I think Nigeria has made so many mistakes in the past. If you look at many critical sectors of our economy, we have allowed many things to degenerate, and we have destroyed through inappropriate policies, practices, a lot of the economic resources of this country. And I think the nation is paying dearly for it. If you take our textile industries, that was booming and beginning to become one of the key drivers of the Nigerian economy, through inappropriate policies, we destroyed the sector. If you look at our artisans, many of our local crafts and industries, many of them have also been allowed to decay. If you look at even the crop farming sector, until the very recent initiatives that is trying to transform it and to help the small-scale peasant farming systems to grow, at one point in time, we became largely dependent on the importation of food. And up to now, we are still striving to be food secure, especially in some of the key crops that we produce and we consume in this country, like rice, like flour and other things. So I have to caution Nigerians and the government of Nigeria, as well as the shapers of opinion, including the media organizations, that we are not only doing this service to the pastoral populations, but also to Nigerians and the Nigerian economy and our future populations, if we, through inappropriate and wrong policies, destroy the system of production that is viable. I urge all our intellectuals to read deeply, to read widely, to read literature, and understand how this pastoral system of production is organized. And let us collectively come to organize and see how do we salvage it and how do we grow it. Taking over from there, professionally, in every sector, there is no one way of addressing a challenge. There is no one way of developing a sector. There are multiple pathways. There are multiple ways. there are multiple scientific, technological, cultural, socio-economic ways of developing sectors. If you take the livestock sector, especially the pastoralists, we have different pathways we have advocated over these years. If you go to countries, even in Western Europe that we speak about, if you go to the US, if you go to Mexico, if you go to Brazil, they are not practicing one system of production. India today is among the largest dairy producers in the world. India does not have the kind of intensive livestock farms we have in Western Europe. They do not have all these Frisian, big production, let me say, factories where milk and beef is produced like we have in Western Europe. The practice in Brazil, in the United States, in Texas, Arizona, is entirely different with how livestock is produced in the Netherlands, in the UK. It's entirely different because the economies, the environments, the ecological conditions, the available resources are entirely different. In countries like the US, where you have vast land areas, you find a single ranch, we are talking about in Nigeria here, occupying 50,000, 60,000, 100,000 hectares of land belonging to a single investor. We cannot afford that luxury in a country like Nigeria. In India, most of the milk is not produced by 150 cows owning households. It's produced by smallholder farmers who keep 2, 3, 4, 5 animals, manage them within their homesteads, grow their feed resources within the local environments, feed those animals, collect that milk, and develop an efficient system of milk collection and a reward system for the smallholder producers. If you go to countries like Kenya, even Botswana that Nigeria always refer to, Botswana does not have big ranches handling 500, 100, 10,000 cows like you have in some farms, maybe in Asia, especially some of the countries like in the Arab world, or even countries closer to us here, like Morocco. They do not have those kind of farms. What they have is a network of smallholder producers owning 20, 15, 30 cows, managed effectively within smallholder areas. Coming back to Nigeria, yeah. If you look at the Nigerian pastoralists, how many are they? How much livestock do they own? Simply, they have been grouped just into 3. Large owning households, in terms of animals, medium-sized livestock holders, and smallholder producers. But what is happening in Nigeria? The training and capacity of both the large herd owners, the medium herd owners, and the smallholder farmers is very weak. And they are still practicing the traditional system of rearing animals. And that is what in literature today, in courts, they have described as open grazing, whatever that means to anybody. And what does it mean? Open grazing everywhere is practiced, except in the highly industrialized livestock farms in Western Europe. What do we mean by open grazing? It's just animals, you see them outside grazing. The only difference is that they could graze in enclosures, which means I'm the landowner, I exclusively use that land, and nobody use that land again. But in our Nigerian system and throughout West Africa, until the very recent years, land is really exclusively used. If you have a farmland, you have the right to go and grow your crops, and once you're growing the crops, nobody uses that land. But in our traditional Nigerian system, everybody can go there and collect firewood. When you harvest your crops, everybody can pass through your farm. You understand? So this has been what we call cooperative use of resources or community use of resources. So in the modern times, Nigeria is trying to rapidly change that. But there will be laggards who will be left behind. So what we need to do in Nigeria today is to look at these systems. We have people who we call large herds owners, owning over 100 cows and above. They need a development model. How do they transit from the current system of grazing animals in 1, lands that are not their own, 2, in marginal areas be them forest reserves, be them uncultivated fields, be them fallow lands, isn't it? So basically lands that they do not own. And I think this is what many people, particularly in the southern states, are talking about, that we do not want to see animal owners grazing in lands that are not their own. So it brings into a big question the issue of the land tenure system and land ownership structure. The second thing is that the pastoral producers, be them large herd owners or small herd owners, do not make conscious efforts in developing resources, particularly feeds for their own animals. So they depend on the natural feed resources.
You do not think that the laws, for instance, that are being enacted in some states, against anti-open grazing, do not take into consideration some of the arrangements that you have highlighted here?
Until we are able to see the laws and read them and study their provisions, it might be inappropriate or an assumption to begin to talk about the content, the spirit of those laws. But practically speaking, development and production systems are least regulated by laws globally. They are more regulated by policies, guidelines, and procedures. And these policies, guidelines, and procedures can easily change with the introduction of a new concept, a new production system than laws, for example. Simply put, if you just change the use of this camera we are using for this purpose of recording, and you bring in a new camera, what will change? The guidelines and the operations procedures will change. So that is how production systems are organized. They are driven more by policies. So what I would have loved to see more is more robust policies that will respond to the current challenges, that legal provisions that will try to catch or that are so difficult to change, that are so difficult, to operationalize, that are so difficult to implement. So what we need to see in Nigeria are what policies are we putting in place? What programs are we putting in place? Which intervention mechanisms are we going to put in place to address the critical things? First of all, we need to increase the productivity of the herd, the animal. How do we achieve that? We need to see policies that will promote, artificial insemination, breed selection, increase nutrition for animals to increase productivity, increase veterinary services, increase extension support. Secondly, we need to see policies and programs that will improve the capacity of not only the smallholder and medium or largeholder pastoral producer, but collective capacities of the entire rural economy within which he revolves, because he does not live in isolation. So we need to see policies that will strengthen animal extension, that will strengthen integrated crop livestock development production systems, especially as our local pastoralists and farmers populations are knitted together within the rural economies, within the rural landscape. So these are the policies we want to see. The third thing is that we have seen how intercommunity relations are getting worse, where communities that live together, either because of ethnic or religious differences or other forms of manipulations, are increasingly being teared apart. How do we need to see policies that will strengthen intercommunity relationship for social harmony and peaceful coexistence. And finally, the other key driver of some of these disturbance and some of these narratives is insecurity. We need to see more robust policies that will bring in inclusive processes of dealing with the current state of insecurity, criminality of various forms, recklessness on the parts of a lot of young people from many of the rural communities as well as the rising band of criminals that are terrorizing our local populations. I think these are the policies that we need to see more being put together to transform our entire system of rural governance and the rural economy and strengthen our communities together.
Okay. Now, the Osun State government recently organized a training for pastoralists in the state. Don't you think that's a step in the right direction?
Certainly, that's what we are looking up to. In fact, that is what is needed. What is needed is just not, the major challenge sometimes is just a one-stop initiative. You have organized the training. What follow-up actions have you lined in the process? And that's why I said policies, programs, and interventions. Once our governments focus on this, we as professionals are assuring Nigerians that within the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we will not only see a peaceful rural landscape, but more prosperous rural landscape that will also positively impact on the national economy.
Now, would you say that there is politicization of this conversation about open grazing or ranching or what have you, as we have been experiencing in recent times?
Sadly, I think a lot of Nigerians, not only the political players, but also even among the professionals and the media, have received a lot of misinformation. And again, there is a lot of negative perceptions and stereotypings, not only of the pastoralists, but also of the entire production system and the entire economy surrounding livestock and crop production in this country. And I think this has not helped us. It is not just politicization at the political level, but also misconceptions and misrepresentations, sometimes deliberate, sometimes out of ignorance. But I don't know the motive behind some of these things. But predominantly, what Nigerians, what the media players, and what our political leaders need to understand is that there is always a negative repercussion for any inappropriate actions. And I think Nigeria at this time, with the challenges we are facing, it will be a big mistake again to go back to that trend of enacting inappropriate policies and pursuing inappropriate interventions that will further dip the country into more chaos and disturbances.
Okay.
No.
Sorry, let me take this. Have you, over the years, have you in any way put together any paper or research, to suggest some of these policies?
Let me say that the challenges of pastoralism or the challenges of traditional management of animals is not a recent phenomenon. It is well documented. That's why I said our political leaders, our public sector commentators, and our media practitioners, you people, please dig deeper into literature. Some of these are not written by Nigerians, or if you want to maybe coin, you say, okay, it's because he's from that sector, he's from that part of the region. No, it's written by international scholars, right from the colonial period. Deep, rich literature. And if you look at how is the entire pastoral economy organized within West Africa, it varies from one country to the other. So it's not just a peculiar Nigerian problem. If you go to East Africa, if you go to Southern Africa, these challenges are still there. Every country is trying to manage it in its own way. But collectively, I think, in most of sub-Saharan Africa, our governments and the producers, including the pastoralists themselves, have not focused their attention so much in responding to the challenges and recognizing the ongoing changes in terms of population dynamics, climatic changes, the dynamics in the economy, and many other realities that have cropped up. And I think if you go back to the literature in the 1930s and 1940s, up to the 1950s, these were squarely addressed. The major challenge is that engagement, the interest of the rural pastoral producers, the herders, to come up and recognize that, yes, we have to modernize and improve the way we do things. Just like our peasant farmers kept also using traditional mechanisms of farming up to this moment. You can imagine, for example, today you said, okay, no, use of hoe, use of cutlass, use of sticks in thrashing millet, or this is an archaic system. You lost a lot. So I'm going to make a law in Nigeria that will ban the use of a cutlass, the use of a hoe, the use of a big hoe, the use of stick, the use of your legs in planting your crops. You say that you have to use machineries from the next cropping season. I don't know what will happen in this country. So it's the same system. So we really need to focus as a society and as a people. And I think our governments have a fundamental role to play in driving this process in a positive way. So there is a lot of literature, like I said, right from the colonial period not to the most recent years, not only within Nigeria, but across West Africa. And there are a lot of lessons, and there are a lot of, I can say, success stories that Nigeria could borrow from, that Nigeria could adapt, and that Nigeria could use. Not necessarily the high-level technological things, which based on the strength of our, our energy, our economy, and other things may be difficult to apply instantaneously, but will require a gradual process of improvement.
Okay. There's been quite a lot of conversations. We'd like to get your reaction on some of the things that have been said by some persons. Things like pastoralism is a business just like any other business in Nigeria, and so should not be given any form of preferential treatment when it comes to, adopting laws and all of that. What would you say to that?
Okay, thank you very much. I have had such discussions, but I think what is more useful is to focus on really those things that will move us forward as a nation rather than some of these controversies. But it's very important to create the appropriate awareness and to address some of the misconceptions and misrepresentations, some out of ignorance or inadequate understanding, while some deliberately being pursued for certain interests. But like I keep saying to every Nigerian is that whatever goes round, like they do say, comes back round. When we destroy any facet or any segment of our economy, it pins us all. And at the end, we will all suffer the pains and the consequences. Taking it, if you look at the livestock economy that is managed by the pastoral producers, the herders, you see, there is what we call, in the value chain analysis, what we call the upstream, the midstream, and the downstream of that particular sector. So the pastoralist or the Fulani herder, like many people just tend to simply identify, he be him Shuara, be him Koyam, be him any of the ethnic groups that keep animals, or any person that keeps animals is always seen as a Fulani herdsman in courts. It's only the animal per se that he owns. So he only rear and feed that animal and nurture it. Immediately he leaves that, then another value chain comes in. They are the livestock traders. Who are the livestock traders in Nigeria? They are not from the herder background. They are not from the herding populations. They are other Nigerians. And they are in thousands. Their livelihoods depend on that. Secondly, there are the transporters that you see transporting, whether it is meat, whether it is live animal, whatever it is. That's another huge economy that is employing thousands of Nigerians. And if you go to the abattoirs, you do not see herders. You see other Nigerians from all ethnic groups, from all walks of life. Coming down, you go to the restaurants, the maisuya, the meat processing factories, all of them. They're also having a thriving business. Then you come back to the milk economy, where we were talking there about the meat. In the milk value chain, again, there are a lot of people who are not of the pastoral background that are strongly pursuing their livelihoods from the milk value chain. Then you go back to hides and skin. Those that process the skin. I'm sure Nigeria is always very proud, many Nigerians are proud to have pomo, and begin to think of the process, those that buy the skin, those that process it, to the restaurants that cook those produce, and we all enjoy in our evenings. These are all value chains that contribute enormously. So that's why I said the analysis done is that it is about over 30 trillion naira industry.
Now,
so if our governments, both states, federal and local governments, cannot invest and support such a sector, then what is the value of governance?
So a follow-up to that will be, in your assessment, how much attention has been given to these, efforts to structure that system or that sector in terms of the transition from the traditional mode of production to what we now want to have, this systemic way of doing it?
The neglect of the sector is not just at the production level, but at many other levels. If you look at even the Nigerian universities, what amount of effort has been put in place to train manpower? Apart from the various departments of animal production, what efforts have been made to train manpower for the local producers? In terms of range management, most Nigerian universities don't run degrees in range management and restoration of the ecologies of the pastoral producers. And like I said, this is ₦1 trillion worth of investments. In the past, when Nigeria had the resources, they used to send people to the US universities to reach range management. So you can see, if we need professionals in this sector, we have to send professionals to other countries to go and train. And since governments have not been significantly investing in foreign training, most of these professionals are no longer available, and everybody recognizes that. Then if you come back to the abattoirs, just look at the situation. There is huge potentials in the exports of meat to many other countries. Many countries in West Africa are enjoying this. In East Africa, huge external revenue. If you look at our hides and skin industry, apart from the few tanneries that we have, Nigeria is still not fully exploiting that. So the neglect is not only at the level of the headers, but the entire sector is being neglected. And I think the level of investments that we need to put and the type of policies that we need to put in place to promote private sector investments, to promote capacity, and to open up opportunities within the sector are enormous. And so the role of government is not only to provide financing or budgetary provision, but also to come up with right and appropriate policies that will promote private sector investment, that will internationalize the trade in livestock and livestock products, and enable the local producers to get all the necessary implements and tools to modernize the production system. So these are all important initiatives or challenges that Nigeria really need to focus on.
So in the area of maybe some kind of national legislation, are there areas that you would love to see some kind of maybe proposals or bills or certain kind of laws that you think would help in driving this process?
The 1978 Land Use Act, which governs access to land and its use, has clearly made provisions for governments to ensure that all segments of the Nigerian productive populations have access to land and are able to get land for the purpose of their economic, social, and other activities. So it's well taken care of in terms of law. But in terms of policies, really there have been very big gap in terms of policies, in terms of programs and their implementation. And I think this is where we need to focus more attention on what do we put in place to promote extension service delivery, to build capacities, to train, to educate, at this level. At the second level, what policies are we putting for social engineering of our communities? How are we driving them? How are we motivating them to recognize the opportunities that exist within what they are doing, to improve this and to engage our youths in more productive ways? The other thing is, how do we promote, indigenous technology? Everything technologically, we have to, import it from other countries. We have a lot of fabricators, those that fabricate simple machines for the crushing of crop residue in the livestock, into livestock feeds. How do we promote this? Those that will take animal manure, process it into biogas, and generate electricity for this system of production. How do we improve, the integration between the pastoral producers and the farming populations? What we call beneficial exchanges between the crop farming and the livestock producing populations. How do we promote and strengthen these relationships? These are all important policies, programs that we want to see. The National Livestock Transformation Plan have been put in place. It has robust provisions, but the implementation have not been vigorously pursued. So we really need to see a lot of investment, a lot of support in this sector, a lot of encouragement of private sector producers, and a lot of engagement with our local producing populations, as well as strengthening our local institutions, especially our traditional rulers, who were very effective in managing the land, the water, the forest, and the grazing areas within the local areas. So the practice that takes place in this community or this local environment with good leadership and strong community institutions may be entirely different from what is taking place in the nearby community. And again, we have not given adequate attention to the coordination of some of these migratory activities of pastoralists. We need to put up a robust framework for coordinating and monitoring the movement of cattle owners from one location to the other, which was well regulated in the past.
What are some of the things that you think can be done in order to sanitize, or I would say to regulate herding, aside from, just banning the open grazing thing?
Yeah. I think I like, this concept of regulating, because everywhere, in every sector, there is nothing that goes without regulations. So it's very easy for us to work regulations that will stipulate how everything can be organized. And that is very important. If we had focused on this, that would have helped a lot in the previous years. That's one. Secondly, it's all about the projection of how this criminality has grown and how it is organized and how it is. The major things from some of our researches is that the current criminal enterprise is taking place within the remote rural areas. And therefore, since it is taking place, with these pastoral populations, we are also living in these remote rural areas. So certainly, the same ecology and the same environment is being used for herding activities and for keeping victims of criminality, especially kidnapping. So what do we need to do? We need to thoroughly analyze this criminal enterprise, how it is organized, and how best to deal with it, away from how we are going to handle and manage the pastoral production system, because they are two different things. The other one is a production system, the other one is a criminal enterprise. So merging the two of them and trying to use a common solution to deal with them will certainly not work. And this is what I keep, many of us has kept discussing and also suggesting and advising governments, the media, and many other opinion shapers in this country, that we need to really contextualize this situation separately and try to find a way of dealing with each in its own way. That is very important. Then, again, like I said, when there is kidnapping on the highway, or when people are stolen, and then people say it's herdsmen, or when bandits attack a particular area, and then you say it's herdsmen, I think it's a total misrepresentation. Because if I'm Fulani and I go to commit a crime somewhere, I'm not committing a crime as a cattle rearer, but he's committing it as an individual. So he's not carrying his cows when he's going to the highway to rob or to kidnap people. So it has nothing to do with herders. So we need to distinguish the two. Herders are people. When you say somebody is a herder, is a person who is tending his animals. And anybody who is not tending animals and goes and commits a crime, I think he should be identified with his crime rather than his background activity or where he originated from or where his parents or the occupation of his parents. Because one of the greatest victims of this insecurity are the herders themselves. Because before anybody was kidnapped, they were first kidnapped. Their animals are rustled continuously up to this moment. And we thank the security agencies for all that they are doing, in trying to deal with these challenges, especially some of these renewed initiatives. But we must say that they are still far from what is expected. There is need for additional engagement with the pastoral producers everywhere they are. So I think this is very important. So to deal with this, first of all, we must use our intelligence services to try, to demarcate boundaries between all of this. Two, we have to do robust rural engagements. Our intelligence agencies, our security agencies, our traditional leaders, we all need to come together and do that. Three, we must strengthen local government administrations. Our land officers in the local governments, our forestry officers in the local governments, our agri-extension workers, our animal health workers, they must all be remobilized to move to the rural areas to work with our local populations. We need to have reliable statistics, reliable information on our populations. Who are the cattle owners? Where are they? Where are they moving to? We have to give the necessary documentations, papers and identifications. And that's why this concept of livestock traceability, livestock registration is also very important. And once we are able to put these frameworks, I think we'll be able to achieve a lot in terms of knowing who our citizens are and in trying to distinguish between peace-loving citizens and criminal citizens. Because this is part of the challenges. You can hardly distinguish between the criminal and the innocent. But once we do this profiling, that will be very important. Again, building capacities of our traditional rulers who have been neglected and who have not been provided with capacity to deal with the emerging challenges. You know, you can imagine a village head who has never seen kidnapping coming, and nobody has trained him or has given him, you know, any knowledge or skills on how to deal with this. And therefore, we need to have stronger collaborations between our local governments, our state governments, and our traditional institutions, and organize our rural populations in such a way that we will be able to segregate between our citizens and what we call criminal elements, that are either Nigerians or they're coming from wherever they come from. They are criminal elements. We must isolate them and deal with them.
Okay, so some of the things you highlighted, you know, simply as a result of the absence of governance at the local level. Some people have attributed, you know, ungoverned spaces as part of why we have this insecurity continuing unabated and all of that. So how do we refocus our attention to the local level, to the rural level? Some people have blamed it on the current structure that we have, that it's, you know, seem to pay more attention to the central government and all of that. So how do we refocus attention to the local level?
I think you, the media, you have one of the most important role to play in this. Let's hold our leaders accountable at every level. Let's hold every divisional police officer accountable for any kidnapping that is done within the area of his jurisdiction. And you will see change. Let's not ask the governor. Let's not ask any other person who has been charged with the responsibility of ensuring security in point A. Let's hold him accountable. Let's ask him who has committed that crime. Let's tell him that he must tell us.
Yeah, but if you talk about the police, for instance, the police do not answer to the governor, for instance.
No. I'm not asking the governor. I'm not saying the governor should ask. I'm saying Nigerians.
So how are Nigerians to do that?
Should hold accountable. We have an Inspector General of Police. The Inspector General of Police should hold his DPO that governs a particular area accountable for every crime committed within his domain. That's what I'm saying. And Nigerians should hold those people that are responsible accountable. If we have a councillor representing a particular ward, let's hold him accountable for whatever happens within his domain. If we have anybody given responsibility over a particular issue, let's hold that person accountable. Let's not call the chairman of the local government. Let's not speak about, you know. So we as a society.
If you say hold accountable, it sounds very bogus.
Yeah.
In clear terms, how are Nigerians, ordinary Nigerians, supposed to hold, you know, say people in authority accountable, for instance?
We criticize leaders. We engage leaders, apart from the criticisms. We discuss. We elect. Isn't it? We appoint. We punish. All of these things are taking place in this country. So let's do that as citizens. Let our civil society organizations move and help us organize our communities based on whatever governance structure that exists within those communities. Until we move towards that, holding every leader accountable, we will keep shifting the blame. And the blame will continue to grow. And the problem will remain unsolved. That is it. So we have to strengthen local governance. We have to strengthen our local institutions and our local governments. Once these are functional, the rural areas will be peaceful. And people say that, these criminals, many of the masterminds of the greatest kidnappings, of many of these crimes, the dealers in the drugs, the dealers in arms, those that deal with in these arms, they are not there in the bush. They are here with us. Those that collect the millions in ransom, they are not there in the forest. They are largely with us in the cities. So it's a huge criminal enterprise. We have to break this criminal enterprise and deal with it as it is. We have to see it as a criminal enterprise that have the masterminds, the foot soldiers, the drug suppliers, the arms suppliers, those that, do the trade in stolen properties. Those that butcher the animals that are roasted, they are not there in the forest. They are with us in the cities. We only see the foot soldiers who are, at the tip end and who are just drugged boys who are given guns, very young people given guns, with no value, with no education, with no any ambition, with no ideology, with nothing. They don't value anything. They just value, and they have no asset. They have no territory. They have nothing to protect. So they are completely a disgruntled, young boys that have been drugged into madness. So these are really what we need to focus. So we need to focus our intelligence agencies. We need to build our community institutions and forge stronger partnerships. And as I always say, stop the blame game, forge partnerships, forge strong relationships, and then isolate and deal with these challenges, while separating it from the need for us to develop our economies and our production systems.
All right. Now, how important is the role of religious leaders in, shaping these conversations, like we are having now? Because it appears that for some of those who perpetrate this criminality, that it doesn't seem like there's any respect for any form of religious, institution, in the country. I mean, it doesn't seem like it, because if there is, then they wouldn't be embarking on the kind of activities that they are engaging in. So talk to us about the role of religious leaders.
Well, I need to distinguish between two. The role of religious leaders in stopping the criminals or in reorienting the criminals, that's entirely a different thing. I think in every society and everywhere there are criminals. And whatever the level of preachings, that's why we have prisons, that's why we have religious injunctions, that's why we have punishments. Because we all know that there are certain people by the nature, they are bound to commit one small crime or another. So that's entirely different. But our religious leaders have one of the strongest responsibilities and a very important role to play in enlightening us, the citizens, to understand the dynamics of this, to understand the injunctions of our religions in responding to this, to help us bury some of these meaningless differences that we are amplifying. Ethnic difference, religious difference, social difference, class difference, socio-economic activity differences, these divisions among us as Nigerians. I think nobody has that stronger responsibility and role than our religious leaders. So that is why they are very, very central and fundamental. They need to preach peace. They need to preach understanding, respect. They need to preach to us the value, the sanctity of life. We all need to come back to our senses to respect that human creature and any other creature by God, and to stop this anarchy and some of these misbehaviors and some of these rhetorics and unnecessary comments, and controversies like you call them, that we are just facing in this country. Nobody has that power, that strength to help Nigeria move out of this impasse like our religious leaders.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and for speaking with us on Daybreak. We have been speaking with Saleh Momale, former Executive Director, Pastoral Resolve, and also a lecturer from the Department of Geography in the Bayero University, Kano. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
We hope to have you again another time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.